And you're online.
All right. All right. Very good. Good evening, Johannesburg. This is Arun Gupta from Red Hat. I'm their director for developer advocacy, responsible for all of their developer outreach efforts. And Jeff, you may want to switch the screen to me because I see you on the main screen right now. So there comes me.
Hi,
All right.
everybody.
So yeah, and with me I have Jeff Masnell. He works in the WildFly team, responsible for integration of JMS2 in WildFly, specifically looking at, we passed the compliance of Java EE7, which is very, very important to be a standards compliant application server. Now, I was there in Johannesburg about, say, 6 months ago in August of last year. Really had a good time talking about Java EE7. And I'm very glad to say that WildFly 8 is now Java EE7 compliance. So today in the presentation from Jeff, you will particularly hear about WildFly 8 and its new features. What has just come up in WildFly 8? What are the cool features that have been integrated in there? Of course, with some coverage of Java EE7. And then Jeff, particularly since he's responsible for JMS2, he'll talk a little bit more details about those features as well. Feel free to keep it interactive. I encourage you to use the #WildFly tag. Since it's just me and Jeff on the Hangout, and you guys are watching over YouTube stream, so I encourage asking questions using #WildFly. On the Twitter stream, I'll be monitoring that while Jeff is presenting. And I'll be happy to take questions. And towards the end, both me and Jeff would be happy to take questions that you have over here. All right. So with that, I will hand over to Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Arun. I will share my presentation online. I sent a mail on YouTube with the presentation, but it will be more interactive if I show you the slide I go by them. Okay, so first, my name is Jeff Menil. I'm a senior software developer for Red Hat. I'm part of the core developer team for WildFly, and I'm also leading the messaging subsystem. And I also enjoy making photographs. Let's start with some quotes. There was a report a few months ago about Java application server from Zero Turnaround, where they compare different application servers according to developer concerns and metrics, including ease of download, installation, real performance metrics, tooling support, server configuration. And each server was ranked from 1 to 5 in these categories. And JBoss ES7, which was the previous version of WildFly, won the award. And it was the winner, it was good, it was consistently good for every concerns. So let's take a look at WildFly. The objective of the presentation today is to introduce the new features of WildFly 8 and also remind you of some of the features that were present in previous version of ES7 but are still there and going strong. WildFly is the new name of the JBoss application server. The new name is relevant because it differentiates our community project from the commercial offering. Before WildFly, there was JBoss ES7, but there was confusion with the upstream, with the Red Hat project named JBoss Enterprise Application Platform. So after JBoss ES7 1.2, we rename it to WildFly. WildFly main focus is to meet the community demands with rapid releases and latest innovation, while EAP is focused toward a more conservative branch, which is battle-tested for mission-critical deployments. WildFly provides a lightweight managed application runtime, and this layer is fully integrated with all aspects of server and is exposed using a variety of APIs and protocols. And this can be used to automate operational needs of any environment, starting from a small JVM on a tiny server to thousands of JVMs spread across the world on different data centers. For JBoss, developer is really the key. So from the beginning, WildFly is designed to be easy and quick to get going. It offers rapid boot time. On my laptop, it boots in less than 2 seconds, and it boots fully. It's fully usable. It also has excellent developer tooling using the JBoss tool project, and there's also plugin contributed by the community for NetBeans and IntelliJ. WildFly also offers a variety of quick start examples, highlighting its different features in a simple fashion. So if you want to learn of a new feature of WildFly, you can have a look at a quick start and see how to use it. WildFly implements the latest Java EE standards as well as additional open source APIs. Java EE is the most common usage of WildFly, but WildFly in itself is not tied to Java EE or to any particular language or SDK. For example, we have a community project named Talkbox, which provides a full Ruby on Rails experience, which is based on WildFly runtime. So you can write Ruby code, but you are using the WildFly runtime to run it. And we offer the same kind of community project if you want to write application in Scala or in Clojure, for example. But this project leverages WildFly runtime. The source code is completely open source and is available to you for free. We are hosting the code at GitHub. So if you have any issue with your application, you can attach a debugger and find out what might be causing the issue. You can then file a bug and then send a pull request with the patch. We really welcome contribution of any sort, whether it's a simple bug report or a patch to fix the issue. So really don't hesitate to contribute to help us improve the quality of WildFly. WildFly 8 has some new features. The most important one is that it fully supports Java EE 7. Like Arun said, we have recently announced that we are fully compliant with Java EE 7. We have also a new high-performance web software named Undertow. We have reduced the number of ports that are required to run the application server, which is quite important if you are running on the cloud. Another important feature is that we have the ability to segment administrative responsibilities based upon different user roles. This allows users to be restricted to specific areas of console, such as to deploy an application or access privileged resources. And this is commonly known as role-based access control. We have also a special audit log, which logs the action of the users, and these logs can be uploaded to a secure location for auditing later on. And one other feature is that now we have automated patching so that we can patch running servers. So WildFly 8 is now supporting Java EE 7. Java EE 7 is the latest release of the platform and focuses around increasing developer productivity and embracing HTML5. WildFly 8 is fully Java EE 7 compliant, so if you are using WildFly, you get access to all the technologies that are listed on that slide. Java EE 7 defines 4 new APIs, JSON, WebSocket, concurrency utility, and batch. Some other APIs were also significantly updated, namely GMS and JAX RS. The other APIs had some minor updates. Let's have a look at some Java EE sample code. WebSocket, for example, is a key technology for HTML5, and it provides a bi-directional and full duplex communication channel over a single TCP connection between the web browsers and the web server. And now with Java EE 7, you can create a WebSocket server endpoint using the @server endpoint annotation. Note that you don't need any deployment descriptor. Everything can be done using annotation. So we create a Pojo class. We use the @server endpoint annotation, and we pass the URL where the endpoint will be published on the web server, namely /chat. Then on this object, on this class, we create, we annotate a method with the @onMessage annotation, and that method will be invoked when the WebSocket is opened, and the payload of the message will be automatically mapped to the first parameter of the message. So here, for example, in the message string, we will get the message sent by the client over the WebSocket. The second parameter represents the conversation, the session between the client and the server. In this very simple code, we can see that we can do some fairly interesting thing. The session class has a method called getOpenSessions, which will iterate on all the other clients connected to this endpoint. So if I iterate over client.getOpenSessions, I will have access to all the other web browsers connected to my endpoint, and I will send them back the message sent by my client. So with these few lines, I can write a chat application, and chat application can be worth a lot, especially these days. And so you have one web browser sending a message. Then on this WebSocket endpoint, we iterate on all the web browser connected to the endpoint and send them back the message. So very simple chat application. Another new API is the batch API. It provides either item-oriented or chunk processing or task-oriented processing. This sample is the job description of chunk processing. Job.xml typically consists of many steps, but in this sample I have just one step named my step. A chunk has a reader, a processor, and a writer. And these three elements have ref attributes that reference a bin that can be resolved using CDI and that are bundled with the archive that you are deploying on the application server. The item count defines the chunk size, that is to say the number of items processed at one time. The reader, the processor, and the writer work together for a chunk number of items at a time. And all this is done with a transaction with automatic checkpointing. That means that if during the batch processing something bad happens, you don't have to start from scratch. You can start from the latest checkpoint. Another new API is JSON. JSON is a key technology for data transfer within HTML5 application. And with JSON 1.0, we have a way to enable the parsing and generation of JSON text object in a standard way. The API provides a streaming and an object model API to parse and generate JSON. And in this example, we are using the object model API. We create a JSON object by first calling JSON.createObjectBuilder, which will give us access to the Builder API using Fluent methods. So we will add, for example, two properties, one named Apple with the value red, and another one named Banana with the value yellow. And then we call build to actually build the JSON object. These objects can be written to Java IO writer or Java IO output stream, so they can be written to servlet directly. The last new API is the concurrency API. And You may be familiar with the Java SE, Java Standard Edition concurrency utilities in the java.util.concurrent package. And now we have an extension to use this API in an enterprise environment. So this API provides asynchronous capabilities which are lower level than the existing asynchronous APIs that are offered by EJBs or servlets, for example. They give you a finer grain level of control and configuration. It's very similar to the standard edition concurrency utilities. Tasks can be defined as runnable or as callable if they return something. The API provides 4 types of managed objects, and one of them is the managed executor service. They can be injected using the @resource annotation, and the application server provides the default instance that you can fairly easily inject with @resource. Once you have your executor instance, then you use the standard Java SE concurrency API, and all the design patterns are available for us. The big difference is that now the threads that are created here are managed by the application server. And so JNDI, class loading, security context information are available from these tasks, while it was not the case if you were using the standard concurrency API. So this was the 4 new APIs in Java E7. Then we have some APIs that have been updated. We have, for example, JAX-RS, which is used to create RESTful services. And now this API has also a client-side API to access a REST endpoint in a standard way. An instance of client is required to access the web resource using the client API. And the default instance of a client can be obtained just by calling client-builder.newClient. A web resource can be accessed using a Fluent API in which method invocations are chained to build and ultimately submit an HTTP request. So conceptually, the steps required to submit a request are always the same. You obtain an instance of client, you create a web target, you create a request from the web target, and then you submit a request, or you get an invocation for later submission. And the benefit of using a web target to create your request become apparent when you're building complex URIs, for example, by using a base URIs and then extending it with template parameters. For example, here at step 3, I pass the ID template parameter, which can be resolved later on when I call resolve template. You can also specify the media type of the response that you are expecting. For example, here, I'm expecting to receive XML. And then I call get, which will correspond to the actual call to HTTP get. And I can pass the type of resource I'm expecting. In that case, I'm expecting the XML response to be converted to a person POJO using JAX-RS entity providers. JMS2 also has been updated for Java E7, but I will talk about that more in the second part of the presentation. WildFly has a new web server named Undertow. It is a flexible, high-performance web server written in Java, providing both true blocking and non-blocking API based on NIO. It has the ability to scale to million connections and has very impressive numbers on throughput. It also allows to add support for modern security standards. Web server is one of the most critical pieces of an application server. So we write it from the ground to allow us to provide the best possible performance and memory efficiency. And Undertow has a composition-based architectures that allows you to build a web server by combining small single-purpose handlers. This gives you the flexibility to choose between a full Java EE servlet container or a low-level non-blocking handler, or a mix and match of both. Undertow is designed to be fully embeddable with easy-to-use Builder API. Its life cycle is completely controlled by the embedding application. So in WildFly, we are using the Builder API to integrate Undertow in the same way that you can do that in your own application. Undertow supports Servlet 3.1, and it also allows to upgrade from HTTP to other protocols. And we use this feature in WildFly to reduce our port usage. I will talk about that later on. If you want more information about Undertow, you can go to its website at undertow.io. How can you create a web server in your own application? With just these few lines. You call undertow.builder to access its Builder API. You need to add a listener so that the web server will listen on the 8080 port on localhost. And then you can set handler, and you can create multiple handlers. In that case, we create just one HTTP handlers, which will send a response to the client with the content type header set to text plain, and with the message "Hello World." We then call build to build the actual Undertow server and start listening for connection. So its Builder API is very straightforward to use. And thanks to Undertow, we have been able to reduce the port opened by the application server. One of WildFly's goals is to support high-density environments like OpenShift or other cloud providers where physical resources are shared and scarce. So reducing the number of ports required by the server reduces the number of physical ports to open. And it also makes the application server simple to maintain and administrate and simple to secure too. We use HTTP upgrade for that. We have reduced the number of ports to only 2. One is the application port on 8080 and is used for application. So if your application is calling the server using, of course, HTTP, but also JNDI or EJB or JMS, all these protocols are multiplexed on the 8080 port. We have a second port for the management on 9990 that is used for any management operation, either using the HTTP API or the native API. There's a little overhead in the initial HTTP upgrade, but once the connection has been upgraded from HTTP to the native protocol, there's no overhead at all. At some point, we may even offer a single port mode to allow all server traffic to go through a single port, but we did not go that far for WildFly 8. We still have 2 different ports, one for the application and one for management. Role-based access control is the ability to restrict access to system or certain portion of it to authorized users only. For previous version of JBoss ES7 and for JBoss EAP 6 or 6.1, the web-based administrative console had an all-or-nothing approach. If a user can authenticate with management security realm, then it will have all the privileges. And this is very fine for small deployments, but for bigger application, the roles are typically divided for mission-critical deployments, and a finer grain control is required. With WildFly 8, we have introduced RBAC, role-based access control, using different roles. There are essentially 7 different roles in 2 different categories, privileged and administrative. Each role is defined as a set of permissions And permissions specify what action are permitted by the logged in user, which is basically if he can look up, write, or delete a resource. Then user or groups are defined in terms of roles, the 7 roles that are defined by RBAC. WildFly also comes with audit login built in for management operation, affecting the management model. By default, it is turned off, but you can turn on very easily. You can log the connection and authentication events and all the management operations that affect the management runtime of the server. All the messages are logged as JSON records, and you can store them either locally in a local file, or you can use syslog to store them in a secure location for later auditing. RBAC and audit login certainly makes this server enterprise grade. EAP, not WildFly, but EAP is certified to military-grade security standards named Common Criteria EL4+. So it can be deployed in highly sensitive, restrictive environments like banks, for example. And that's possible thanks to features like audit login and RBAC. We have also added automated patching to WildFly, and this feature will be used in future version of JBoss EAP. It allows libraries and configuration updates in an installation on a runtime on a running server. Patches are simple zips containing the updates and metadata associated to the update. You can apply multiple one-off patch, so for example for security issues, and they are invalidated by the next point or cumulative patch release. And of course, you can roll back a patch. Let's remind you of some of the features provided by JBoss ES7, which are still going on in WildFly 8. ES7 introduced the concept of multi-server topology using managed domain, while previous version just had the notion of a single instance server. And this provides multiple ways for centralized administration. So, a standalone instance is a single instance of a server. It started using the /standalone shell script. And this mode is really recommended for development. However, if you have more than one standalone instance and you want to manage multiple servers, then it's up to the user's responsibility to coordinate the management across the servers. So for example, if you have multiple standalone servers that are running and you want to deploy an application on them, it's up to you to deploy individually on each of these servers. With managed domain, you have the ability to run and manage a multiple server topology and manage multiple instances from a single control point. This is started using the domain shell script, and this mode is really recommended for production. Managed domain is composed of 4 entities: host controller, domain controller, server group, and servers. Here we see, for example, an example of a domain topology. The host controller, so on host 2, 3, and 4, we have 3 host controllers, plus 1 on the host 1, which is the master host controller. They are all started with the domain shell script, and they only are concerned with server management. They start, stop individual servers that run on its hosts, and they interact with the domain controller to help manage them. The domain controller, and you have only one per domain, is a special host controller that is configured to be the central management control point for the collection of servers in the domain. Then you have the notion of server group, which is a set of server instances that will be managed and configured as one. Sorry. We'll take some water. So for example, we have two server groups, A and B. And in a managed domain, each application server instance is a member of a server group. And domain controller and host controller ensures that all the servers in a server group have a consistent configuration. So the host controller and domain controller will ensure that if you deploy an application to a server group, all the servers in the group will have the application deployed or none will. And then finally, you have the server, which is the actual server instance. It runs in a separate JVM process from the host controller and is started by the host controller. User cannot launch this process from command line. They have to go through the domain controller to start new servers. WildFly comes with a command line interface named jboss-cli, which allows to connect to both standalone instances or domain controller. It's using a very simple Unix-style shell syntax, and it provides a contextual command, and you can use tab to have a completion on resources and operation. It also provides high-level composite operation for the most frequent administrative operation. It persists the changes on the application server, so all configuration data, all management operation using the JBoss CLI is persisted in the server in XML configuration file. It's possible, it's totally possible to change directly the XML file on the server side, and the server will be updated to use the XML. However, to do that, you need to know the XML schema. While using the JBoss CLI, you have resource tab completion to help you write the correct management operations to change the resources. WildFly also comes with an administrative console, which is a responsive web application. It provides a GUI for all administration tasks with wizards to help you run them. It's very simple, it's fast, it's lightweight, and once again, you don't have to write any XML configuration if you use it. And it works both for standalone or for domain mode. Note that it's not a replacement for Red Hat JBoss Operation Network or Red Hat John. It's more a complement to provide a simple, basic management console. So to sum up, WildFly 8, it's Java E7 compliant, it's lightweight, it's manageable, it's highly scalable from a teeny server to thousands of servers on different data centers. It's open source, so you can contribute to the code, you can open issue if you see bugs, and you can contribute patch if you want. And it's available now. We have released a few days ago the WildFly 8 final version. Do you have any question? Let me go back up. Okay. Arun, is there any question? I've not looked. I don't understand. You're mute.
I was muted. So yeah, there are two questions on the Twitter stream. The first one is, wonder how the WildFly 8 JSON implementation compares to Google JSON features/speed.
That's a good question, and I will have to check, but I think it's using the Jackson project to provide the implementation.
Right. See, I think one thing to understand about that also is that the JSON API in Java E7 is pretty basic, in the sense it only provides a streaming and object model API. Google JSON, on the other hand, gives you the ability where you can say, take a POJO, on a POJO put an annotation, and that's what would automatically be converted to JSON back and forth. That ability does not exist in WildFly or Java EE 7 today. So hopefully that functionality would be added in Java EE 8, and then of course WildFly will implement that. Yeah, and I already made a note. I'll talk about so JSON API in Java EE 7 is something that we provide to begin with, but there is a lot more other cool things that we share as part of that as well, such as Jackson is what you talked about. REST Easy provide a lot more other functionalities around JSON. So I'll make a list of that and hopefully blog about it.
Okay.
Now another question over there on the Twitter stream is the Undertow with web server HTTP upgrade mechanism as part of WildFly 8 seamless for clients? That is low-level protocol multiplexing magic.
Sorry, can you repeat again, please?
Yeah, sure. The question is, I'll copy paste on the group chat also. So let me copy it here.
Okay.
And I'll paste it in the group chat. And now I will read it again. Is the Undertow web server HTTP upgrade mechanism as part of WildFly 8 seamless for clients? That is low-level protocol multiplexing magic.
Yeah, definitely. The JNDI client using your remote naming, the AGB client, and the JMS client have been upgraded so that it's seamless for clients. You don't even know that you are using the HTTP upgrade. We have upgraded the client protocol for that. However, you need to update to use the WildFly 8 client jars for that. It's not compatible with AS7.
Right, because that feature is something new in WildFly 8, which allowed us to really cut down the number of ports, as Jeff talked about, very, very critical for high-density environments. If you go in a cloud, you don't want to expose multiple ports. That's a potential hole in your firewall. Now, by exposing only 2 ports, we are allowing WildFly to be a lot more scalable, a lot more usable, a lot more cloud-friendly. And then that is definitely made available using HTTP upgrade. And in terms of clients, yes, Jeff answered that already. Yes, it is sort of magic, we like to call it, but that's what it is.
Oh, and one thing I should have mentioned is that we have a cartridge for WildFly 8 on OpenShift. So it's very simple to start using WildFly 8 on OpenShift. I will add a link about that.
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to get started with WildFly today, there are several options. You can, of course, download WildFly 8, and you can get started with that. If you want, you can run WildFly on OpenShift, which is Red Hat's PaaS offering. Not only Red Hat, but CloudBees is also offering WildFly. So you have lots of varieties and options in which you can start. You can run WildFly in IDE of your choice, Eclipse, NetBeans, IntelliJ. All of those 3 work very well as well. So we don't really restrict you to any PaaS environment or any IDE environment. We're all about offering choices. You can take it and do it the way you like it. Let me see. Okay, can we see how fast the app server starts, Undertow and all?
Well, if you want to do that, I encourage you to download WildFly and run it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Because as they say, there is proof is in the pudding. So if you download WildFly, which is about 140 megabytes, 148 to be exact, actually. So if you download WildFly on my machine, which is a MacBook Pro, lots of RAM, a solid state drive and everything, it starts in less than 2 seconds. Really fast, really slick. Now there are a lot of comparisons that have been done with Undertow and a lot of other application servers, or other web servers, or other, I should say, frameworks. So what I'll do is I'll post a link again. If you give me a second. Oh, not here. I'm gonna go to my blog.
One thing I can add about that is that when we are developing WildFly, we are running the integration test, and we are starting and stopping the application server in our test. So we are very concerned for ourselves to have the fastest way to boot the server. So yeah, it's not just for figures, it's because we are using that every day, and it's saving us a lot of minutes.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, people like to call it as, eat your own dog food. But I think we, since Jeff is from France, I'll use the analogy, we like to drink our own champagne. And it's a fine quality product, so why call it dog food? Call it a champagne. So, well,
yeah, that's better.
In the group, yeah, in the in the group chat, I also posted a link to a recent set of benchmarks that were published by Tech Empower. Now, these are benchmarks where they have compared about 90 frameworks, and they use the term framework very loosely coupled. And in that sense, they're saying Spring is a framework, and Undertow is a framework, and Apache HTTP is a framework. So they're concluding, including a lot of things as part of that framework. But the good thing is, even with such a wide range, if you look at the numbers on the benchmarks, and maybe I'll respond back to Alan because he asked that question. So let me respond to him. Here are the benchmark numbers. Now, if you look at those numbers, you will realize that Undertow, even though it's brand new web server written from scratch, has performed really well in all the categories. It's among the top 10 out of those 90 in all of those. If you rather look at plain text, if you just want to send back and forth plain text, then Undertow, Vertex, and Netty, those are 3 frameworks, all from Red Hat, are the top 3 frameworks. So in that sense, application server is really solid. We have done some internal benchmarking with Undertow, and we have been able to run up to 1 million concurrent connections with Undertow. So I think the web server is very promising. And the main reason we rewrote the web server is because this is such a critical piece of application server that everything pretty much goes through it. So you want to make sure that you're getting the maximum juice out of it. And that's the reason we rewrote the web server. Okay.
Yeah. Undertow is really the evidence that there's a lot of innovation that remains to be done on web development.
Right. Yeah. And this is only the first version. This is only going to get better from here. Yeah. So the next question is, what are the key differences between community edition and commercial offering?
Okay, I don't want to spend too much time to distinguish between the community project and the Red Hat offering. It's really about WildFly. Basically, the difference there are some technical difference. JBoss EAP is supporting Java EE6 for the moment, while WildFly is at EE7. Really, what you want to understand is that WildFly is the community project and is really where innovation happens. And then we have our Red Hat offering, which is for battle-tested application, for critical application where you want to have support and you want to have security fixes in a timely fashion. So it really depends if you want to have some innovation and be fast, or deploy for mission-critical application.
Right. See, typically, if you understand the release cycle, WildFly is on a much more rapid release cycle. Every few months, like a year and a half, we will do a release because we want to make sure we stay relevant with the community needs and everything else. JBoss EAP, which is the commercial offering, is on a much more conservative branch where we do a release every 2.5 to 3 years. Sometimes, there are more than 500 plus bug fixes that are not in the community release and then are available in the EAP release. Now, those fixes are put back into the community release, but on a later release cycle, for example. So there might be some out of sync. The other part is EAP release is the one that is certified to run on a host of JDK databases, operating systems. So if you really care about any of those combinations, then EAP is really the one to go. In terms of feature comparison, Jeff already pointed that out. JBoss EAP 6.2, which is the latest one, is EE6. WildFly is EE7. When JBoss EAP 7 comes out, which will be based upon a future version of WildFly, that will be EE7. So feature-wise, they will be very similar. But still in terms of production quality, it's going to be much more barrel-tested, much more well-integrated with the rest of the Red Hat products. Okay. So I'm going to go to another question. Let me paste it in the chat log first, and then I'll read it. It says, does WildFly still log and then rethrow the same exception like JBoss 3 to fill up your screen and log files?
No, actually, that's a good question. That's the small things that are really annoying for developers when you are trying to write your application and you see time again and again the same logs. So when we say that WildFly, for WildFly developers are key, that's the kind of thing that we want to avoid. And now we won't log and rethrow the same exception with all the stacked rest a lot of time. We have been very careful about that. We have also localized all our exception message. So if you use WildFly, you can have your message in your own language. We have really wanted to increase developer productivity by easing the way we use WildFly.
All right, that's a good answer. And then the last question that I see on the Twitter stream right now is, when will the docs for JBoss logging be updated to current release?
That's a good question. If it's not been updated, it should be updating quite soon. We have spent the last few weeks really focusing on putting WildFly 8 out of the door. It's possible that the documentation is lagging behind, but that's something that needs to be fixed. And something also, when I was saying we are welcoming contribution, documentation contribution is also very important for us. If you have some difficulty to find help in the documentation and you find out how to do something, we are really interested to get that contribution back so that the next developer will have directly the response in the documentation.
Right, right. And if you think that something is lacking in the documentation, more than encourage to either file a bug at least so that we know that is missing, because once it file a bug, then it's a lot more trackable, because emails get lost generally because we get so many emails, and everybody, not just us. So file a bug, file a pull request. This is everything on GitHub. So send us a pull request. This is how I would like the document to look like, and here you go. So that's your contribution back to the product that you love, the community that you love to be. Let me see if there are any other questions.
Okay.
Using #WildFly, I don't see any other questions. Oh, there you go. Okay. What versions of
so if
wait, one more question. Hold on.
Oh.
As soon as I said, it says, what versions of JDK does WildFly 8 support and will support at the later stage?
Okay, so WildFly 8 supports Java EE7, and Java EE7 requires to use Java 7. So that means that the ground basis for WildFly 8 is Java 7, and we are actively testing with JDK 8 built to be sure that the day Java 8 is released, you will be able to use WildFly on it.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, we have thousands of tests. Those are run. We work very closely with Oracle. As soon as the JDK 8 promoted build comes out, we take it into our test harness, run all those thousands of tests over there. Hopefully in WildFly 9, the timeline still TBD. In WildFly 9, we might even be able to leverage some of the JDK 8 features like lambdas and streams and optimize it. For WildFly 8, JDK 7 is a requirement. We don't know yet what the requirement for WildFly 9 would be. Okay, and that was pretty much the last question I see on the #WildFly hashtag. And so I would like to thank you very much for the Johannesburg Jug, Josie Jug, Richard, Mark, Alan, everybody else who is in the Josie Jug.
Wait! I still have some slide about JMS too.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. No, I would like to thank, and then I will give it back to Jeff, who will talk more about JMS.
Thanks, Arun. Yeah,
sure.
I just wanted to add some slides since I'm working on the JMS and the messaging subsystem of WildFly. I just wanted to show you a few more slides about JMS too. So let me find. Okay, it's just a few slides about the new features with JMS2. As you may know, JMS 1.1 was released in March 2002, so it's 14 years, 12 years ago. And JMS 2 had just been updated last year. JMS 2 was the opportunity to use the modern things on Java, like Java 7, to build a new simplified API, which is still compatible with JMS 1.1, so you don't have to change your code. It will run fine as it is. But you can now leverage a fluent API using runtime exceptions, using idiomatic constructs, making it much more simpler to send and receive message using JMS. An example, for example, if you want to send a message to a destination, it's really a few lines of code. Now you can use an annotation to create your queue. So if I use the @JMS destination definition, I can define a queue that will be deployed when my enterprise application is deployed. And I can use the @resource annotation to retrieve this queue from the application server. JMS 2 main new interface is the JMS context interface that supports injection, so that you can inject it in your application. And to send a message, you now can use the new Simplify API to call createProducer.send and pass the destination and the message body you want to send. And note that it's runtime exceptions. You don't have to catch all the JMS exception, and it's a fluent API. You can chain the method. And the code to receive messages is also very simple. You use @resource to get the queue or the topic. You use @inject to get the context object injected. You create a consumer on the queue, and then you call receive body, and you specify the type of the message body and the timeout. And that's it. You have your message. You don't need to cast from message to text message, for example, to get the text. You don't need to start a connection to start receiving message. This is done automatically. So JMS 2 is really all about simplifying the API to help increasing developer productivity. As I said, we have JMS destinations, so you can define queues or topic. There's a standard set of properties, but you can also have provider-specific properties. So for example, I can say that my queue will be non-durable by passing the properties durable equals false. And you can use this annotation to define either queue or topic, depending on the interface name. You can do the same for JMS Connection Factory. You can specify the interface if you want to use a topic connection factory or queue connection factory. You have a set of properties to define the size of the connection pool. You have JMS properties like client ID if you need to use durable subscribers. And you can also specify provider-specific properties. Note that this annotation has a corresponding deployment descriptor if you want to do that in XML. But I find it much more simpler to use Java annotations for that. And then you have JMS context, which is really the most significant update to JMS 2. A JMS context encapsulates both a JMS connection and a session. And if you have developed application using JMS 1.1, it's not straightforward to know when to use a connection, when to create a session, etc. Now you don't have to care about that. Just use a JMS context and it will handle the connection and the session underneath for you. And since we are requiring a Java 7, we can take advantage of its features, for example, auto-closable. If you use a JMS context in a try with resources statement, you don't have to close it. It will be closed automatically. And in the same way, it's automatically started. As soon as you create a consumer from the context, you can receive message. You don't need to call connection.start to start receiving message. So much more simpler to use. And as a bonus, if you are using it in a Java EE web or EJB container, it can be injected using CDI. So first, an example using an external JMS client. The first steps are always the same than previously. You get a reference on a connection factory or on a destination using JNDI. But then it's much more simpler. You can use a try with resources statement to create the context by calling connection factory.createContext. And doing that, when you go, when the try with resources statement stops, the context will be automatically closed. And like in the previous example, if you want to send a message, you create a producer and you call send by passing the destination and the message. And if you want to receive a message, you just create a consumer. You don't have to call connection.start or anything. As soon as the consumer is created, you can receive message on it. And you can receive the body of the message just by calling receive body using a type and a timeout. You don't have to cast to text message. So much more simpler. And it's even simpler if you are using JMS context in an enterprise application. In that case, you can use CDI at inject to get a reference on the context. And you can specialize your context by using a new annotation, like for example, at JMS connection factory, if you want to use a specific connection factory. Or you can even don't specify it at all and use the default JMS connection factory provided by the application server. You can specify password credentials. You can specify the session mode, whether your session is transacted or not, or if you want to use different acknowledgement mode. And then everything is injected in your context variable. And you don't need to close it whatsoever. The application server will close it for you when you don't need it anymore. So it's much more simpler now. A new feature of JMS2 is the notion of shared subscription. That was a restriction in JMS 1.1 where you could not have more than one consumer for a topic subscription. What I mean is that when you send a message to a topic, all consumers will receive the message. So it was not possible to have a set of consumers that could load balance the message processing. All were receiving the message. Now with JMS2, you have the notion of shared subscription, where a set of consumers can share a subscription. So for example, on my image, the consumer 2, 3, and 4 are all using the same subscription that I called my sub. So when a producer sends a message to a topic, only one of them will receive the message. So that's very interesting if your application needs to do some message processing and you want to balance that on different nodes. And the notion of shared subscription is orthogonal to durable or non-durable consumers. This is done using the context interface. So you inject your topic using the @resource annotation, you inject your context, and if you want to create a shared consumer, you need to specify the topic and the name of the subscription. If you want to have a durable shared consumer, you also need to specify the client ID on the context, either by calling context.setClientID or by annotating the context. Another new feature is that now you can send message asynchronously. In JMS 1.1, sending a message was a blocking operation. That means that it was returning when the message was sent to the server. Now you can use the completion listener interface to send asynchronously and be notified when the message has been received by the server, either successfully and then on completion will be called, or if there's a problem and then on exception will be called. Note that the completion means that the message has been received by the server, not that it has been processed or consumed by anything else. But if you want to increase throughput of your application, sending message asynchronously can help. Finally, just a few words about message-driven configuration properties. In Java EE6, the specification specified a few properties that make portable so that you can specify the acknowledge mode, the selector, the message selector, the type of destination, or whether the subscription was durable or not. But surprisingly, there was no standard name to specify the destination to look up or the connection factory to look up. Now with Java EE7, you can write portable message-driven bean that can be deployed on any application server with the same names. So if you want to write a portable message-driven bean, just use connection factory lookup to look up the connection factory, or destination lookup to look up the destination, and you can port it from one application server to another. And that's all I had to say on JMS2. Just a few slides about that, really.
Thank you.
Okay, Arun, is there any question about that?
Yeah, there are still a few more questions, so I will go there. And the first one that's coming along is right here. It says, can logback SL4J be used with Hibernate 4.3.1?
Okay. I don't know. So I would say you should put the question on WildFly forum. I really don't know what can be used with Hibernate 4.3.1.
Yeah, I think this is a very version-specific question. It's easier to kind of ask on the forum. The next question is, what happens with WildFly 8 when the client browser does not support it?
Well, if the web browser does not support WebSocket, it won't be able to connect to the server. So it's really up to the web browser in your web application to provide a failback if you want. But I would say WebSocket starts to be quite mainstream now, especially on mobile devices. So if you are writing new kind of web application, you can expect to have web browser support. Otherwise, it's up to the web application to provide fail-safe and failback for WebSockets.
Right. Now, we do hope that you are not using IE6 or 7 or 8 or 9, because in those browsers, there is no support for WebSocket, for example. So that's something important to know. And a general guideline is you want to go to this website called as caniuse.com, caniuse.com/WebSockets, and that kind of gives you an idea which browsers and toolkits provide support for WebSocket and how far back do they support. So that in general kind of gives you an idea which browsers support and what should be your target browsers, for example. Okay. The next question here is, are you able to configure a security realm via the admin console?
That's a good question. I'm using JBoss CLI to
Oh, I can't hear anything now. Jeff, I can't hear you anymore.
Arun, are you back?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. That's good.
Okay.
Okay. So the last part I heard was I used JBoss CLI and then I lost you after that.
Okay, so I was saying, yeah, I prefer to use JBoss CLI for that because with resource completion, it's simpler to configure the security realm. I don't know if it's possible using admin console, and you should ask that on the user forum. The developers that are in charge of the admin console will be able to answer you in a short time.
Right, right. So I think in general, admin console is for people who are afraid of configuration files. Well, I wouldn't say afraid of configuration files, or who want to deal with the configuration files. They want a nicer user interface. But JBoss CLI, in my opinion, is a lot more powerful interface and provides very rich contextual shell where you can do automatic command completion and the node completion. So for example, depending upon where you are in the management tree, it'll automatically complete the node name for you. So I think it's very powerful in that sense. So definitely supported using JBoss CLI, but in terms of admin console, you want to check with the user alias as well. Let's see.
Yeah.
Quote of the day is good. And okay, good. Well, I want to correct actually one of the quotes that is quoted on the WildFly on the Twitter is it will work just as long as you don't use IE 6, 7, 8, 9 and IE n+1. That is only true for WebSockets. It's a very generic comment. Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. Jeff, anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's it really. It was just an introduction on WildFly, and I hope you have find that interesting, and I'm looking forward to have some of your feedback. And if you have any question, do not hesitate to use user forums, either looking for similar issues, or if you have any question, do not hesitate to participate. We are really interested by any contribution.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Johannesburg Jug. Thank you, Richard, Mark, Alan, everybody else, and the Josie Jug. Hopefully I'll get to visit you guys again. I was there last year. So maybe later this year, maybe next year, I don't know, but I would love to come back. Maybe do a hackathon around WildFly 8 and generate some contributions. I know one of the things that we talked about last year was how to generate more contributions. So hopefully in future we will be able to do a WildFly hackathon, give you guys some bugs to fix upon. So let me know if you would be interested in any sort of contribution, and I can make that happen. All right, once again, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Josie Jug, and I will make sure I will share. So Jeff will share the recording with me, and I'll share it with you. And that should be fun then. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, Josie Jug. Bye.